Welcome to Outer Space, International Arts and Class Travel Podcast.
On this week's show, Gamification, Can We Win? The second part of our interview with Mike Haas. As usual, commentary from the space station with Paul. And with Jonas this week, we have Charlie Hendren with a song called All Right. Hello, my name's Rob McDonald and I'm the host of Outer Space Arts Podcast. And today we have a returning guest, Mike Haas. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
I'm good, Rob. How are you? Glad to be back.
Great. Well, we're gonna talk about games again. We talked about games with Mike before, but we're going to take it into a different area. But just a brief reminder to people who Mike is. Mike is He's from Boston in the US. He's based in Barcelona in Catalonia. He's a collage artist, an educator, and a board game designer. I think that's what we said more or less last time. I think I got it a little bit more tighter this time than the first time. That's about right, isn't it, Mike? That's who you are?
That covers the bases pretty well, yeah.
Cool. Oh, yeah, and you're an artist first. I remember the conversation we had last time.
Right.
So we're going to talk about certain aspects of games this time, and we're going to talk about gamification. Now, when I hear that word, I think gentrification or something like that. So can you give us an explanation of what gamification means?
I can. I'm going to read off the dictionary definition because I think that's the most efficient way to do it.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a term from about 2008. And it says here, gamification is the application of game design elements and game principles in non-game context.
Okay.
That's basically it. That's sort of
it's like playing a game, but it's not a game.
It's like using aspects of games and mechanics to drive either marketing or user retention or engagement or learning or like scientific things like that.
Okay. So it's basically using the game context, which we've discussed in the last episode, which, there'll be a link probably coming up just now if I've done it right on YouTube. And if I haven't, look in the details below. But it's a game used out of context. That kind of thing a game used in a different scenario than an actual game situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like an easy example, right? Is like Facebook is the gamification of social interaction. Tinder is the gamification of dating. And the thing that makes it gamification is the use of the like button and getting points and super likes and these elements that have sort of.
So likes are kind of like a prize. It's like you win.
It's a point. Those are like points that you get.
So like this podcast.
Engaging.
If you listen to this now, go and like this podcast. Go and subscribe. You will get a prize.
Yeah.
In fact, we one of the episodes I just recorded with Paul, for the first time, we decided that we might make our pre-discussion available. Because we always have a little chat before we do our outer space bit, and we had this big discussion, and we thought we had a magic word that we wouldn't go into this area, and then we recorded our pre-discussion for the first time, and this is going to be available to those as a gift. So maybe that show's gone before this one, who knows? But the point is that I get what you mean now. It's basically a way of pulling people into your little ideas, or into your thing.
It's using the psychology and the hooks that we developed through game design in other spheres.
So that happens a lot these days, I'd say. Is that an information technology thing? The gamification? You said 2008 it was coined.
It's a new term for something that's been happening for a very long time.
Okay.
And I think, so I'm going to take us back to the beginning of games, give a little bit of like a rapid quick fire history.
Okay.
Game elements, games sort of in many cases evolved from shamanistic and spiritualistic practices as ways of communicating with the fates. Sort of like the very first
like a religious
dice,
performance, you mean? Or
yeah, like the very first dice ever used evolved out of throwing knuckle bones, and understanding that
and
there's
dancing
probability
around them
involved.
Like in some crappy movie you might watch.
Yeah, throwing things on the ground and reading them and creating sort of abstract meaning out of them. That's sort of like games became a vernacularization of the shaman practices.
Okay.
And in some of the very, very beginning games, right, the very first games that we know about, they were on one hand a game. You would race or whatever, but they were also sort of like tarot card, the board game, where you would go, and depending on where you land, that is supposed to tell you part of your fate. Right? It's supposed to guide you through, and you're supposed to sort of understand.
That's that linking with the social questions, a bit like Facebook, which is all about social questions and interactions and has every element of it. I don't want to make too close a comparison. I'm just trying to understand. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And so okay. Yeah, I get it.
So using abstract elements to give a concrete meaning about something. And it's never really gone very far from that in a lot of ways. We're gonna kind of do an experiment, play a little of a game here. I'm going to.
Do I need some dice or something? Or
no. I'm going to describe some rules to a game. I'm going to see if you can figure out which game I'm talking about.
Okay.
All right. So every player starts out in the game as an individual. And the point of this game is to get to the end of your life with as much virtue points as you can get. And there are various ways that you can do this. You can take actions and do good deeds. That gives you virtue points. You can go to the central community space. That gives you virtue points. You can do other things, and other things can happen to you over the course of the game that actually take away virtue, or take away, or give what would I call it? Sin points, for lack of a better word. And over the course of the game, you need to engage in you need to go to the community center. You need to do good deeds, and if by the end of the game you have more virtue than sin, then you have won. Okay,
so I've got to guess the game, yeah? My brain is whirring away. Now, my initial answer is that's not a game, that's church. I don't know. Did I get it right?
That's right. That's what I was going for.
Okay, cool. So it's not. Is that a game?
It is not necessarily. So this is where gamification comes in, right? It's not a game per se, but you have non-value. You have a sort of intangible point system that you need to engage with, and you need to engage in the system in a specific way to turn those virtue points into faith points, and then manage your sin points in order to eventually, at the end of the game, have more virtue, more faith.
So you're talking interestingly about it, because I didn't think we'd go this way with gamification, because I thought, we're going to talk about Facebook and Twitter and pull them apart and say they're the evil capitalist methodology to controlling our lives.
That's coming up next. We'll get
But actually, you're starting on this spiritual, historical gamification thing, which is quite interesting.
Well, and also I'm trying to paint this idea that gamification is not new, first of all.
Right. Okay.
It's not necessarily something that has been done intentionally, but it comes down to our psychological hooks that we have as humans, and the way that games and game designs have managed to hook into those generally positively, but how they are tools to ends.
Well, when we discussed it last time, and we went into Monopoly and we went into other subjects, and it was quite an interesting discussion about what games were. That was our first podcast on this. What are games? And we were specifically talking, weren't we, about board games in that time. But what it feels like now is that when we talked about that, we mixed the question of art and play in that. And one of the things that strikes me is when you talk about it like you are, it's kind of play is something that we always do. So it should hardly be a surprise that there's games and gamification in our lives, because it comes from how we operate as a species. At least in, I mean, I would say at least in this capitalist society, which we understand because we are from it and live in it. But you're saying also before maybe, that it's quite a human, the play thing is actually quite an important thing about how babies and children learn, but it's also about how we learn and interact. It's a constant thing. And so gamification is just normal. Is that kind of where we're going with this? Yeah,
it's something that it's always with us. It's constant in how we interact with, it's how we learn, it's how we interact with other people, it's how we build and engage in social interactions. But it's only been within the last decade or 12 years that it has become a science.
Okay.
And people are dedicating their lives, dedicating their career to researching and finding really the most efficient, effective ways that we can sort of, I'm going to say like, hack our brain is not the right way of sort of going about it, but there are elements of truth in that term.
Okay. So well, it's like the development of psychology, and exactly. I mean, my son's psychology graduate, and I talk to him about these things sometimes. And psychology is very important, because if we understand how humans work alongside sociology and how they work as a generalization together, then you can make things happen. You can pitch things. And this is something that capitalism does, that we talk about, but it's also something that the left needs to understand as well, because this is the game of who controls the world. We're an animal. We're a pack species as such, aren't we? So let's be honest. It's about who's psychologically twisting the knobs.
That's right. Yeah, it's sort of like through the course of human history. We've always known that dreams are important, but it wasn't until Freud and Jung came along that they were like, oh, maybe we can also like control this a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where we are with gamification.
Okay. So that's a bit of a history. Let's get back to how it affects us and what how does it work on a day-to-day? Because if it's now understood, it's clearly not understood by everybody, because I'm like learning about it, and I thought I knew quite a lot of stuff. Of course I don't, but you know what I mean. But the thing is, people hear the word gamification and they'll think, oh yeah, that's video games. That's what. But they're actually understanding what it is and what it does to you. We all do it. I mean, I'm checking likes all the time. On our new Instagram page. Have we got any likes? Is it? No, oh God. And I think, oh, well, nobody really likes the podcast then, do they? And it informs me of how good or bad we've become.
Right. You've applied sort of an inherent value to a thing that is inherently valueless, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like these are the tricks that I'm talking about. So, these days, we are engaging with gamification at almost every level of our life. Whether it be, like I said, Facebook, Tinder, any of these any social media is based on building community and building social connections through the use of things like likes, which you can conflate to points, or creating small how do I, let's see if I can find an example. Basically feedback loops. Facebook and Twitter and Instagram have taken this idea of sort of you're engaging with the platform, you're sort of inputting what you like and what you don't like and things that you're looking for. And then the algorithm and the platform spits back something based off of their, data mining and gives you more of what you want or what you think you want. Well, and then that creates a feedback loop of constant engagement.
It spikes something in my mind. Maybe you can. Maybe it's what you're saying, kind of. Basically, I've got quite a lot of Facebook groups and Facebook pages that I operate. The podcast is one of them, but I do my own art page and I do the projects I'm involved in as well, the art projects. So I use Facebook quite a lot. I use other media too, but that one quite a bit. And I have this sort of conversation with a robot. It feels like maybe that should be the title of this this podcast. But I have this conversation with a robot who's always asking for my money. And because if you've got a group, you can do various things. Yeah, and if you've got your own sort of profile, you do various things. If you've got a page, then you can pay. Yeah, and so you think, oh, okay. So I'll have a page, I'll have a group, I'll have a private thing here. I'll do this way and I'll do that. Well, I'll have an Instagram. And then it comes to the big event that you're trying to push and you put it out on your page and 3 people like it. And normally you get 20 likes, you know what I mean? And you think, oh, fucking hell. And the little boost button comes up and it says, and you get, oh, okay. And you do it once. Yeah. And this time you do it, suddenly you got 200-300 hits. Now, maybe it was a good subject you were promoting. Then the next time you do it, it doesn't. Yeah. And then the next time it does, and it keeps you confused. It keeps you in the game.
Keeps you in the game.
Yeah, right. This is the interesting thing. But the point I wanted to develop onto, I did a Spanish Civil War online festival, and some of it allowed me to boost, and then some of it, because it was politically sensitive, wouldn't allow me to boost it. So there's this whole control of the game going on, but you're completely in it. You're completely sold. I can do nothing about it. It's like I can't send an email. I can't send a letter. I can't do a leaflet on it because it's all online, Right. So I'm into this game. Is that something that you're talking about?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And that sort of goes into something that I was going to touch on a little later about, especially within this sort of gamification within the capitalist system, is understanding how whatever platform you're using is monetizing. Right. That's something that I think we should touch on a little bit later after we sort of go into more sort of the other possibilities of gamification, because these are the easy ones to talk about because this is the constant thing that we're interacting with. But we can talk about the way that credit cards use miles and points to act as benefits to encourage people to sign on. That's gamification.
I was offered one this morning.
There you go. Businesses and companies can offer something, for example, unlimited vacation. It's one of those things where, generally speaking, when you sign up for a contract, you have a limited amount of vacation, and that limited resource of vacation time becomes a limited resource and more valuable because of it. And then if a company offers you unlimited vacation, they're essentially devaluing that resource. And it sounds good, but there are many studies that show that once someone signs up for a contract with unlimited vacation, they practically never use it because there's other mechanisms within the system that incentivize other things. Right. Staying on the job.
Unpaid, limited vacation.
I mean, there's a little bit of,
because I'm taking that job, the job that has full pay on unlimited vacation. I'll be taking
that. It sounds great.
I'd buy it.
It sounds really good. And then there's other things that sort of like are hidden underneath that psychologically and sociologically.
So it's one of the things that pops in my mind. I don't want to take you off track because I know you've got lots of really interesting stuff to tell us, but it kind of reminds me of like the modern office or the modern capitalism. What a great way it is to work in sort of these free environments where everybody can make a cup of tea when they feel like. And it's often pushed. I've never seen it in my own particular reality or know anybody that works in those places particularly. Actually, that's not entirely true, but these open plan, easy go, if you need to go and have the morning off, fine. It's like this kind of model office capitalism. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's got some sort of gamification shit going on in it that keeps people actually, it's a way of manipulating their minds to think they're in a free environment when actually they're being just as exploited as they were by the people next door working in the factory?
Generally speaking, and I also don't have immense personal experience in these environments either, but generally speaking, you will find elements of gamification within those spaces to help, and not necessarily control in this aspect, in this context is probably correct, but also sort of this idea of guiding, it's sort of like, and sort of helping focus attention in certain things at certain times of the day kind of thing. And you will also find that, interestingly, and this might be more correlation than causation, but you will find that these are like tech companies, game companies, more sort of like modern thinking.
Yeah, this is where I was thinking of. I mean, both you and me spend all our time in a workshop, eh? What do we know about such places? But I have read articles about how there's a factory-like stuff in some of these kind of places, but then also that they are these sort of free, chilled-out environments, but actually people are very exploited. There's a lot of labor boss conflict going on in them.
Yeah, and I think maybe a clearer, if we're talking about sort of gamification in a space, a clearer example of that would be sort of what's happening in education these days, and the way that there's a big push. And I think this is sort of where it's important to sort of remember that gamification is not inherently good or bad. It's a tool, right? Okay,
yeah, that's
and so there's a lot of push to use this tool in education systems and as ways to modernize education, because generally speaking, based on an outdated agricultural system, timeline that doesn't exist anymore, but also ways to use technology and, again, these sort of little psychological tricks that help students focus on a task or develop intrinsic value in what they're doing, an intrinsic meaning, as opposed to basing everything that they're doing off of the reward of a good grade.
I suppose that's a little bit easier, particularly at the moment, to use sort of information technology methods of that, because I guess the teacher always used to do games to teach something. Not all teachers, particularly language teachers, I know quite a lot of them. They often use games to teach. It's quite a good example. And now there's things like the Kahoots kind of thing that they get used in classes, and particularly with COVID and that sort of stuff, that's on the increase.
But beyond like even just using games in the classroom, we're talking about more like using the golden stars and stickers to like,
so that's a million years old, eh?
Yeah. But we're taking that kind of mentality, that kind of thing that we've used because we knew it worked, but now we're applying the science of gamification.
Right, okay, so this is the crunch of the matter here. This is the crunch of the matter that we're talking about. It's not that gamification is new. It's not that it's good or bad. It's that we really know about it now, or some people really know about it.
That's right.
And so that brings me probably to the point we sort of went over a bit earlier, is I'm kind of interested in the class struggle angle of this, of where actually we're manipulated by it. and we're used, and because not everybody has this knowledge, and it's who applies it. And there's two questions I really want to sort of pose to you. One is, give us some examples of how you think maybe it's a bad thing, and why we need to be wary, and why we need to be educated on it. And then I've got like a secondary question, which hopefully you can delve into, is the left and socialists in general. How should we deal with it, with this knowledge? Because it's there to be shared. Should we be having left-wing meetings with gameologies going, that kind of stuff going on in them? So it's two big questions there, but give it a bite.
So examples of gamification with negative impact, I think. Social media is sort of the easy choice, something that we can look at. Everyone sort of knows it, sees social media, and especially nowadays, sort of the impact on, the phenomena of fake news and information manipulation and things like that. So one of the things that, one of the tricks of gamification is it usually introduces points or badges or some kind of reward that is essentially meaningless. That there is no monetary value to a like. There's no, it can. I guess at this point, there is monetary value to a boost because you paid for it, and it has that value, right?
It's a monetary value for them. For Facebook,
exactly.
And in theory, more people see my stuff.
In theory, right. So what happens, the tricky thing is that humans are incredibly adept at giving value, in like a new inherent value to something that is essentially valueless.
Right.
So we as a society have, for many possible reasons, put such intense and sort of feverish emphasis on likes and follows and creating this network, this virtual network, that we have sort of created our own tailspin around this gamification mechanic, right? It is not an exaggeration to say, not a big exaggeration to say, that Trump's only true power that he has right now, besides being the president, is that he has one of the largest Twitter followings in the world, right? And so he is able to bypass all of the traditional methods of communication and talk directly to the world in a way that really is only valuable because we as a society have applied our value to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a chat on the podcast with Tyler McNally from Belfast, and he runs a left-wing media agency there, and we've done a podcast with him. And this subject came up, obviously because we were talking about journalism, media, and the arts of that, and and what is truth. Yeah. And so one of the things we're talking about here, this is one of the mechanisms of how new truth is created. It's created by this knowledgeable game playing, so it's like, here's the psychology of people. This is the algorithm for it. This is this. All that seems very good to me, but how does that really relate to real social forces? Because Trump can only go so far with his shit. It does distort, it does change people's minds, but reality also has an effect on people still. So I'm sitting in front of my computer, I like my things, I'm walking down the street, I like my things, and then I go into work and I lose my job. And I thought, I show them my likes on my phone and say, come on, give me my job back. It doesn't work that way, does it? I'm just interested to what you think about how real social forces mixed with social media, because we've sort of gone that way. And I think lots of people don't understand that connection. I'm not sure I do all the time, but we do live in that age, don't we, where this is much more powerful then I think we've given account to. And I think this comes on to my second part of the question.
Yeah,
Radical and socialists and these kind of people, what do we do about that? How do we approach it? You just have better Twitter accounts telling different kinds of stories, you know. I mean, I'll give you a little example. Maybe I'm going off a tangent here, but there was a hashtag on Twitter. I mean, I don't like Twitter very much, and I'm trying to build a Twitter account for this podcast. So I'm trying to get my head around it. And then I saw something called hashtag Socialist Sunday, and I thought, what's that? And what it was a load of people who count themselves as socialists, just liking each other, you know, on Sundays. And I thought, well, that's quite cool. Yeah. So they're playing algorithms, but it's a game.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of this gamification era that we're in.
That's exactly right. So I think one of the most important things right now is to teach literacy in gamification and sort of the tools that are being used against the general unsuspecting public. Because there's a lot of these little things that if you've been playing games for a long time, or if you sort of like are a little bit more used to the way that the system works, it's a much easier for you to be like, oh, wait, this doesn't make sense. You know, like you can sort of like, it's like, I was thinking about this before. It's like, you know, the very first film that they showed was a train coming at the audience, right? And in that very first moment, everyone in the theater jumped out of the way because they didn't want to get run over by the train. Okay. And then for every subsequent film afterwards, people understood more and more what exactly is sort of happening here.
So what we can
kind of do the same
ourselves.
Thing. That's right. We can kind of do the same thing with the gamification, right? So it's very easy to fall into the trap of, well, you know, I really want some more likes. I'll just give them a couple of bucks and, you know, I'll boost it and it'll feel good, right? You know, like I'll get a couple of, you know, whatever. And then you immediately sort of start getting committed into that system. And it becomes this feedback loop that every once in a while it works really well. So it's just enough to kind of push you to do it again the next time, even if it's not a one-to-one going to work out. And I think but to take it a little further, I think there's a lot that social movements can learn around sort of designing for accessibility and introduction through understanding game design. And this isn't, this is sort of the other side of game design that we haven't really touched on yet, but this idea of like building tutorials, building it into sort of an app experience, and instead of opening the app and being like, I have to figure all of this out. It's all right, welcome. This is what you need to focus on right now. And then you focus on something else. And building out that sort of step-by-step introduction to a theme is a really good way to get everyone involved instead of just the people who can handle that kind of cognitive load, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's also a generational question as well, I would have thought, to a certain degree. If I look at my granddaughters, they go, Granddad, you got any games on your phone? I go, no, I don't know anything like that. And they take it, and suddenly I find I've got 20 games on it or something, and they're not paid for them. They're just there, and I didn't see it.
Exactly.
But it's a comfortability with technology question. But I think the key thing that you're kind of saying there about gentrification is, you know, even in the way that we pose it from the left, that we have to understand it, you know, and designing, how we design, how we create our arts, how we look at these things has an impact, and we can't not do that just because it stinks. You know, just because it means we're getting inside somebody's head with their psychology. We've got to go there. Is that kind of what that
is kind of what I'm talking about. It's, you know, we are in the game, right? The game is happening whether or not we play it.
It's somebody press start and we're
exactly. And so we need to figure out exactly how to play the game to the best of our ability. And things like the Socialist Sunday, where you sort of jack the algorithm by everyone in a socialist sort of circle liking everyone else's socialist things is one way of sort of building out that.
Yeah, I thought
foundation.
It was quite good. I have to be honest. I thought it was quite innocent, and it allowed certain freedoms, because one of the problems on the left is everybody wants to have their say in their way, which is a good thing. But it's also can have a problem of we all hate each other more than we do capitalists. Sorry, go on. You had a point.
Well, and I think that's where step 2 in like figuring out the algorithm is one thing, and then onboarding people onto the message is the other thing.
Right.
And there's a lot there that I think can also beyond working the algorithm, beyond sort of the brain stuff. It's about figuring out how taking cues from games, which generally speaking, especially nowadays, do a much better job at bringing anyone who wants to play, even new players, someone who's never touched a video game before, bringing them into the experience, bringing them into the game.
Cool. Well, listen, Mike, we've gone through quite a lot there. We had a first podcast when we talked about what are games. We talked about it in a historical setting in terms of board games, particularly we spoke about there today. Today we've taken a bit of a sort of, not a theoretical thing, but we've gone a little bit towards understanding what gamification is in its forms. What other things when we're talking about games, what other things do you think we need to sort of spend some time on the podcast?
The other thing that I think is an important thing to talk about, maybe a little bit also on the theoretical side, is this idea of game as entertainment versus game as service. And it comes down to this idea in game theory, which is that there are finite games that end, and there are infinite games that do not. Okay,
finite and the infinite. I like it. I'll tell you what, I'm going to stop you there. You know why? Because I like the finite and the infinite. And that's, I think, let's come back and do yet another podcast on it. Let's do a part 3 and let's open up this question and then see where we go from there, because I think it's a good place to stop it.
Sounds good.
Okay, mate. Well, look, take good care and have a chat with you very soon. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Bye now. Okay, then let's take ourselves up to the space station and hopefully we'll find Mr. Paul Paranoid up there. Are you there, Paul? Copy.
Receiving you loud and clear, Rob.
Very good. Glad to hear. How's everything? Are you okay?
Yeah, we're all right. We've got some magnetic pole tracking stuff that we're trying to do up here, but it's going okay. I mean,
I think you just put some tin foil on your head, don't you, and a couple of carrots out your ears, and you'll be fine.
Tell you what, that North Pole is really on the move. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. Basically, you and Mike and your gamification episode, I really enjoyed it.
We're playing some game together. So this is like number 2 of so far a 3-part series. On gamification. So I got a feeling you've probably got a few thoughts on the old games. I imagine you're one of those people that sits there with sore fingers playing games. Am I right? I don't know.
I love games. And the reason, I've always loved games. I was in denial about it for a long time. But then I got very, very ill, which was the end of my sort of attempt to break into the music industry. And something that eventually came out of that was because when you're ill, you're not really... Well, you're too well to do nothing, because you can't sleep all the time. You know what I mean? But you're not well enough to do anything constructive.
So you're sort of in a halfway zone, which a game would game kind of suits, doesn't it? I mean, I know, it makes sense. A lot of people sort of lie in bed and whatever, but you're a bit of a game junkie then, are you?
It's just that I'd love to have been the sort of person who took the opportunity to read.
Yes.
But I'm horribly dyslexic, which means that I can read, but it's extremely it's a strain.
Yeah, we share that problem.
Yeah. Basically, you read 3 pages and have to go back a page because your mind has begun to struggle with the load, and as a result of that, and also if you're very imaginative, I don't know if you find this yourself, like also because of the strain, your mind also tends to wander, and you can be reading it. So that's reading out.
Yeah.
So
we could talk about reading and maybe another day, but I think it's an interesting question actually. And we'll definitely do a show on dyslexia. Definitely, we've forgotten that so far. Anyway, I got loads of things to say on reading books, but let's not go there. Gamification, Paul. Give me something. What's your view as a fingers person?
Yeah, video gaming and gaming generally. I mean, for me, because of my time I've spent playing video games, it's become, and with my health taking a long time to get better, I've got a lot invested in video games and the evolution of video games. And they've come a long way. They're very sophisticated things now. And the game that sprang to mind that's relevant to this, which I want to bring up, is a game called Death Stranding, which people may have heard of, by Kojima, who developed, is famous for creating the Metal Gear Solid series, which is, Metal Gear Solid is a more basic military type, for sort of a third-person shooter type game. But Death Stranding is quite a revelation. And the reason I bring it up is it's kind of like gamification has gone full circle. We talked about how games have been part of society and how they have a function in society right from the beginning of occultism, from what Mike was talking about.
Yeah, it was really interesting, wasn't it?
All the way through to learning tools and of course just pastiming and ways as well of people getting. I mean, we can't all of us be the best hunter or the best breadwinner, or the best at but somebody who's a cracking pool player can have low status in their job, but have that can be their thing. You know what I mean? Everybody has to have some sort of element, and gaming fills this area. So gamification is
what do you mean by that? Just develop that point a little bit more. So somebody who plays a game can find themselves in it, is what you're saying? Or I didn't quite understand your point.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be successful in every aspect of life. You only generally have to be successful in one aspect of life. And you might be rubbish at a lot of things. You might not be the most important person at work. You might be the least important person at work, but you might play for the pub pool team, and your sense of self-value and your sense of having, you can tolerate being at the bottom of the totem pole at work if you've got this one area where you are appreciated.
And how's that mixed with, how's that connected to the gamification and the game thing you were talking about?
What I was just saying there is I was just basically tracing how games are woven deeply into the fabric of society. They have lots of functions. Some of those functions are to do with teaching tools and ways of developing certain skills, but also they have a social status role as well.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
So this game, Death Stranding. Yeah. Can you tell us about that then?
Well, basically, where I'm going with this is that Death Stranding is a video game. It's a console game, initially on the PS4, and it's just come out on the PC, I believe, probably the Xbox as well, I'm not sure. But basically, it's a completely different kind of game. Whereas most games are basically competitive, where in the single player mode you'll be making your way through the story with various objectives. So your job might be to start at point X and get to point Z and overcome the obstacles in between. And then there may well be a multiplayer game version, or just a multiplayer game, like Call of Duty is the most famous video game in the world, I think, where you basically play two sides on a conflict, and you'll have a territory, which will be a map, and you'll basically just go around whacking the other side, and last man standing wins. That's what video games have been for a long time. The single player story mode and the opposing two sides multiplayer mode. Death Stranding is an utterly fascinating departure. What you play it online, it's an online game, but you never meet the other people playing the game. You have basically the premise that's very similar to the Kevin Costner movie, The Postman, where you're living in a post-apocalyptic world where survivors live in these kind of like underground bunkers, separated by sort of several, sometimes hundreds of miles from each other, and your job is to supply those huts with the materials and food they need over very, very challenging terrain. And what their job does is it gives you the tools to build using 3D printers, set in the future, 3D printer technology, to make the traversal of that difficult terrain more easy. You start off on foot, but as you go, you get access to things like motorbikes and then later on trucks. But the terrain is usually too difficult to get your vehicle over. So you start accumulating materials and buying, accumulating materials to build things like roads and bridges. And here's the beauty of it, though. Everything you build is available to other players that started the game at the same time you started your game. So basically, you're part of a large team that could involve, I don't know what the numbers are, I don't know if it's hundreds, but and you build these structures to help you traverse the area. It's the first cooperative game. I mean, obviously, you're cooperating with other teams when you're in combat games, but you're operating with the express.
Yeah, but it's not cooperative. It's basically cooperating to kill others, rather than what you sounds like you're building. I mean, obviously, I haven't played the game, but it sounds like you're building an infrastructure for other people to be able to get around as well. Is that right? Is that the kind of thing?
Yeah. Everything you build, other people can use, and everything everybody else uses, everything everybody else builds, you can use. And when you first experience this, right, it's incredibly uplifting. Like, you feel like you're not. Whereas so many games are like dark and a little bit cold and a little bit competitive. It's the first game that it's the first game I'm aware of where everything. It does have one small precedent. There was a game called Dark Souls where people could leave messages for other players.
Maybe there are others out there that need to see the light of day as well. I mean, I imagine that the market is dominated by bigger corporations who want to keep that corporation business out of games. But also, I suppose there is an element of even the worst aspects of this capitalist society we live in, that there does need to be cooperation to get things done. But it sounds interesting. I mean, how would you see that it connects with this sort of gamification? Then you say that this is kind of a positive of it.
What I'm saying is now, but there is one moment now. Here's the crazy thing: is that you build a bridge, say, and you'll be going off doing something somewhere else, and other people, when they use your bridge, can like it.
So we get to the true gamification within the game. So it's and is that a reflection of real life, I suppose, in the game, or I guess you feel good about getting the likes as you go over the bridge.
It's genius. It's genius, and they're real people. They're real people liking it. They're real people they're marking your card with a like that sends, and you're getting the same kick you get from when you're using Facebook and Twitter and somebody likes a joke you made or a comment you made or a GIF you posted. But now it's in this. So what you've got is gamification has come full circle. We've got real life with games in it. And then we've kind of brought gamification to things about real life that weren't commonly gamified, if I may use that. Right, and Mike said something really interesting about how when you were talking about watching the likes and the trajectory of success of our show, you were talking about how Mike made an observation that you'd actually put value into something that was essentially valueless. It has a great importance to you and I and to Jonas that people like the show, but it has no financial or productive quality. It has no weight in the terms of goods or finance at this point. Obviously it might do later down the road.
At this point, because it is obviously it's all linked up to monetarization. We are putting out in this series. There is a donation button to help the show. Plug. Why don't you like it? Why don't you give us a $5? So actually, there is a connection. The more likes you get, the more the algorithm sends you back, the more people that see it. There's a sinister side to it, though, April. We've highlighted, I think correctly, as Mike did, that it's not all negative, and it is about understanding something that's always happened. It's just that we're sort of kind of conscious more of it. And Mike made the point that we have to the thing to do is to be conscious, and to learn the fact that these things happen, and then you can make a value judgment as you're doing.
I didn't get that was what Mike was saying. I don't think Mike was saying that gamification has always happened. I think he's saying that games have always been part of human society. But
I think he was saying that the things that you talked about, the star, like giving a gold star in the old sort of school thing, that we have. I think what he was pointing out is that it's become sort of more acknowledged that it exists and it's used. I don't
think that does go back. I think that's a relatively recent phenomenon. I don't think that was going on in the 50s and 60s, was it?
Well, I don't know. People listen to the show and see what Mike's. I thought he was emphasising that it's something that's existed within the gaming structure, but that the powers that be have become conscious of the power of it, and therefore it is a new thing.
Well, I agree with that. The point I'm making, which I think is important, I may be wrong, but the point I'm making is I think what Mike's bringing to the table here is a very telling awareness of how gamification has been introduced into something about society that used to be completely organic and didn't have the gaming thing in it. Games have always been part of us, part of society, but we didn't used to get the mechanics of our society, like working. Like he made that extraordinary example of people who get kind of like unending, unlimited annual leave. And then the gamification of it is that, well, you could take all that time off, but you will lose credits or gain discredits by, there's an incentive and a disincentive, situation where you don't end up doing it. You end up taking, I bet this is how it works. You end up taking less time off. I bet that's how it works.
That's what he was saying. Yeah, we didn't go into it, but I think we should in maybe a couple of the future ones. So the negatives of it, Paul, the gamification, what's it doing to us? What's it doing to us?
Here's what I've got for you. So I love Death Stranding. It's a terrific experiment. It's very frustrating as well. A lot of it is about the terrain has to be incredibly frustrating for the game to work. So you can spend a lot of time grinding your teeth. But you get this incredible emotional lift when you find the respite of somebody having thoughtfully crafted a road or a bridge to get you over what you were afraid you were going to have to face. Because you can look at the map before you go and stuff like that, and sometimes you don't know what's going to be ahead of you, sometimes you do. Anyway, the point I'm making is that here's my fear. This like and dislike system and the power of it, we're basically finding a way to grade each other. We're finding a way to elevate each other and to feel about ourselves that's incredibly formalized. And what if Death Stranding, for all of its brilliance, is actually an educational tool to get us used to the sort of thing that I've heard is going on in China, and it's very difficult to know for sure, but I've heard about this very sinister social crediting system in China. From what I understand, basically what we have here is something like Twitter and Facebook and the popularity contest. We've basically turned real life into a popularity contest with an electronic monitoring system where how funny we are, how polite we are, how politically correct we are is all monitored on a kind of like pretty sort of frivolous level at the moment. But if that were to be turned into some kind of caste system where the opinions that you espouse and the attitudes that you espouse and the how well perceived you are by other people, which is the bit that really frightens me, how you're perceived by other people. If God help us, if that becomes the paradigm, right? If that ends up having an effect on your effectiveness as a social being, so say your capacity to get a mortgage or your capacity to get a loan, your right to have a driving license. This is what people in the conspiracy theory universe are foreseeing. I'm not saying they're right, but that is what the warnings were. And if this isn't the Orwellian nightmare with technological
I think the Orwellian nightmare that you raised there, Paul, is something that I think we're both fans of George Orwell for lots of reasons, and I think raising that there is valid in the sense that a world where everything is recorded and it indicates what you are allowed to do, basically, and you're flagging it up that this is taking place in China, and I mean we've got to look into it more. I mean we've got the gamification. You know, it's there's a sinister side to it, and I mean what you're flagging up here is it's already taking place. Yeah.
What appears to be completely frivolous, if it doesn't stay in that zone. I mean, you must have heard about people. If you or I went for an interview, we know that they have the capacity to go on Facebook or Twitter and trace us, even if they just had our phone number. They could find us, and they can find out the sort of things that we subscribe to, the sort of people we like, the sort of things that we say, and they might make decisions about whether or not we're suitable for being employed at their company.
They might even listen to this podcast. That's us with no more work ahead of us.
Oh ever. God.
we might get a job on a crazy radio show. Who knows? If you're listening out there, we both want a job. Okay, Paul, I can hear Jonas knocking on the door. He's rattling the cables. We're coming to the end of our transition time. We'll talk again very soon, and we'll have more. I mean, people that are listening to this now, there is the first part of the gaming series with Mike is out. This is the second. You're listening to it, and there's a third coming, and I think we're going to have a few more on this one. So I'll say goodbye to you now, Paul. You take care, yeah?
Yeah, that was a great interview with Mike. Looking forward to the next one.
Okay, take care now, Guy. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mike, for being our guest again. If you like what we're doing and would like to support the show, you can go to our website where you will find the donate button and can contribute to our show. I will now play you the song I'll Write by Charlie Hendren. Enjoy.
I will let you know when I arrive beneath the ancient sign of brass and open skies. Though I left you without goodbye, all right, my dear, all right. my own, I will wave the endings by. What we describe, how can the moon escape my smile? I thought live lives pure and bright. How she rose tonight. How rise, how rise, how rise, and I will let you know when I arrive.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have something to say to us, then join our Facebook group or contact us at outaspace.com. That's outa-space.com. See you soon!